Hello, I am Peter Okwache. Welcome to Focus on Africa, our top stories. A Nigerian doctors' organization says the real number of coronavirus cases could be 4 times higher than the almost 9,000 confirmed cases.
Is what we are missing going to hurt us and overwhelm us by the large number of people that will suddenly be showing up with COVID infections?
It was very painful, and whenever I see a woman visitor, I think she's going to cut us again.
The cutters going door to door during lockdown, concerns of a massive rise in FGM procedures in Somalia. And will coronavirus lockdowns lead to more children going to work instead of schools? Also on the program, legacy labels. Snapping up talent or showcasing culture. As Def Jam Africa signs its first artist, we'll be finding out what they've got planned for music lovers on the continent. Thanks for joining us here on Focus on Africa from BBC World News. The head of the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has called for a greater effort to counter the coronavirus as evidence grows that it is increasingly being spread within communities across the continent. John Nkengasong said it was time to test people with flu-like symptoms and to increase social distancing measures. It comes amid concerns in Nigeria that a relatively low number of cases could be the result of low rates of testing. 50,000 tests in a population of more than 200 million. It's led to concerns from Nigeria's Medical Association that the real number of cases in the country could be as much as 4 times higher than the nearly 9,000 confirmed. Celestina Olulode reports.
Keeping positive inside this Lagos isolation unit. As a physiotherapist turned patient, Oluwatunde encouraged others on the ward to stay active and optimistic.
Seeing people get discharged daily gave us hope. We were always happy that people were getting discharged, and it was something to look forward to. After testing negative twice, I've been discharged. I'm happy.
Lagos is the epicenter of Nigeria's coronavirus outbreak, but with low levels of testing, the country's medical association warns the true number of cases could be more than 4 times higher than currently confirmed.
We are worried because the number that we have declared is still far cry from the total number that we have or we expect. We are disputing the result because we have so many patients who have shown signs of COVID-19, and we are waiting for 3, 4, 5 days before we see their results. So it means we have a lot of backlog.
In the north, there's particular concern that coronavirus may be moving untracked through the country. At the end of April, Nigeria's head of disease control appealed on Twitter for testing materials. A doctor here in Maiduguri told us the teaching hospital had run out of extraction kits earlier this month. Just 18 of Nigeria's 36 states have designated testing labs. The remaining regions often send samples huge distances. But Nigeria is driving up testing levels, and so far this month, the number of positive cases have more than tripled.
The fear that we should have collectively as a continent, and Nigeria as the most populous country in Africa, is what we are missing going to hurt us and overwhelm us by the large number of people that will suddenly be showing up with COVID infection. So this has nothing to do with Nigeria CDC's numbers, but it's a common understanding that we have to test to find and test aggressively.
Fear of COVID-19 is spreading with reports of mysterious deaths in the north. Here in Kano, it was gravediggers who first raised the alarm last month. Authorities say they're scaling up testing as fast as they can. It may be the only way for people to understand if coronavirus is causing these deaths. As a major trading hub with a dense population, virologists are concerned the virus could spread from Kano to other parts of the country and the continent. An inquiry is still underway, but for now, people here are waiting for answers. Celestina Olulode, BBC News.
Now, let's shine our spotlight on child welfare during this pandemic lockdown. And with many schools closed during the time of the pandemic, child welfare issues are a growing concern, as any abuse is largely happening out of sight. In Somalia, for instance, cases of FGM, female genital mutilation, have reportedly increased massively, with so-called cutters going door to door offering their services. Let's hear testimony of girls who've been reaching out for help.
Since I was told that I will be undergoing FGM, I don't sleep at night. I don't know what is going to happen to me.
It was very painful, and whenever I see a woman visitor, I think she's going to cut us again.
I keep wondering when the cut parts will grow back.
I don't know where to run or to escape from the cutter. I want to run to my neighbor, but I'm afraid she may not be able to save me.
I have nightmares during the night, but I can't tell my mother.
Well, let's go live to Hargeisa to speak to Sadia Alin. She's the head of mission in Somalia for Plan International. Sadia, how much more of a problem has FGM become since COVID-19 restrictions, and why have they grown worse if they have?
First of all, the impact of COVID-19 has forced girls out of school, and that has increased their vulnerability to multi forms of violence in their own homes, including FGM. And traditionally, FGM is carried out during the period of school holiday in urban settings and during the rainy season in rural areas. Both are happening at the same time, and now girls are forced to stay at home and facing the horror of FGM as the parents are taking the advantage of school lockdown period as they see as an opportune time for the procedure as well as an ample time for healing. But also there's another factor for FGM to increase, which is the economic turndown because of the lockdown, which has motivated the cutters to resort to harmful practices and livelihood sources. And they're knocking doors to door, including my own, which is really very sad and something is really alarming.
We've also heard the testimony there of young girls who have been reaching out to your organization and other local groups in the region. How are you responding to these cries for help?
It's really sad when the person who should be protecting those children are the one who are doing this harmful practice to them. For instance, if the parents who are supposed to be protecting girls are calling for cutters or allowing the cutters to, it's really very sad and very difficult to protect, and especially a country where there's no laws that bans FGM is difficult. And we have local partners who have a coverage at the countrywide level, who have volunteers to raise the public awareness and community awareness about the harmful of the practice. But at the moment, things are getting difficult, and it's really very frustrating. And what we need to ensure that during COVID-19, we must address the increased risks of gender-based violence, including FGM, and also we have to make sure those programs to be included in the response and recovery plans. Girls and women should be involved in the development of the response and recovery plans, and to ensure that their unique needs are taken into account and their voices are listened.
Indeed, and this campaign against FGM has been going on for a very long time. Can you remind us what the long-term impact and implications of being cut is on girls?
Actually, this it is a very dramatic and painful procedure. It causes health complications, both immediate and long-term of the girl, and it includes hemorrhage, psychological trauma, and even death. And pain doesn't end in the instant pain, it goes lifetime. It is a torture. It takes away and robs girls' opportunity of life. It stops them from reaching their full potential. It silences them. And feeling not being able to own your own body is really very terrifying feeling. And the expectation for you to own something is absolutely zero. When the girl feels she cannot own her body, then her aspiration to own property, to lead, to go education, it is really worrying, and we need to stop it. And
indeed,
and for us,
there's a need to stop it. I'm just looking at some statistics here. There are around 200 million girls and women in around 30 countries in the world who have undergone FGM. In communities where this is widespread, what needs to be done to protect young girls?
We have reached time that we need to end. And bringing to an end FGM requires a simultaneous change in attitude and behavior at all levels in the society. Women and girls need to reject FGM, which only be possible if men and boys also oppose the practice and accept uncut girl. And also for that to happen, individuals' opinions must be made public, and community must openly discuss about the FGM and collectively decide to abandon the practice. Also, we need religious leaders to clarify publicly that there's no religious justification for FGM and dispel the myth of FGM.
Okay, Sadia Alin, I'm afraid we'll have to
to
leave it there. Sadia Alin, Head of Mission for Plan International in Hargeisa. Well, children are also vulnerable during this period across other areas as well. There are concerns that lockdowns that are taking children out of school and putting increased financial pressure on parents will raise the threat of children being put to work, with many already working in sectors such as mining and on farms in the cocoa and cotton industries. Well, joining me now to talk more on this is the International Labour Organization's Senior Technical Officer for Child Labour, Benjamin Smith. He joins me from Grilly in France. The issue of child labour is one that people have long spoken against. What have your field officers been saying about children being put to work during this lockdown period?
Yes, well, we're gathering evidence. In fact, we'll launch a report on the impact of COVID on child labor on 12th of June, which is the World Day Against Child Labor. But we know that what is happening is a massive loss of livelihoods. The UN has estimated that between 42 to 66 million children will be pushed into extreme poverty as a result of the pandemic. And so what we're hearing from the field is that the ingredients are there for a real spike in child labor between the poverty impact, particularly in the informal economy. About 60% of the world's workers are in the informal economy. That number goes up to 85% in Africa. They've lost 60% of their income in the first month alone of the crisis. Now, if you combine that with the education shock, the 1.5 billion children whose education has been interrupted, and in developing countries, a small minority of countries actually have national distance learning platforms. So there's a lot of time on their hands. There's economic pressure, and those are what we've seen in past pandemics, from Ebola, HIV/AIDS crisis. Those are the push factors for child labor.
And Richard, which are the groups within these children? Which groups are the most vulnerable?
Yes, so child labor is particularly, the incidence is higher in groups such as migrants, refugees, children living with disabilities, minorities, and so these groups are precisely the ones that are most likely to get hit hard by the pandemic. They're least likely to be able to practice social distancing. They don't have adequate water and sanitation. And so that social marginalization, and these children come from poor families that are working in the informal economy, that is really quite a threat. In fact.
And Richard, unfortunately, we haven't got much time, but what can be done to these children? I mean, those who are already in work and those who need to be stopped from getting into the work sector?
Well, to give you an example, I was lucky enough to hear the testimony of one of the families that we work with as a single mother working in Vanilla in Madagascar. Her two children, 12 and 13 years old, really, in her words, have no future because she wasn't able to afford school fees. And so they were working alongside with her in the vanilla field. And most child labor is in agriculture, in fact. So Francine was her name. And she says that for her, what made the difference was support to boost her income. And that was done through diversifying her plot of land so that she could continue to grow vanilla as the main source of income, but also other crops like tomatoes and ginger. She received training on managing their finances.
Okay, I'm afraid we'll have to leave it there. And it is Benjamin Smith, I do beg your pardon, from the ILO. Thank you very much. This is Focus on Africa from BBC World News with me, Peter Okwoche. Still to come, we'll bring you the latest in a series of raids on remote villages in northwestern Nigeria, where at least 70 people are thought to have died. Welcome back, I'm Peter Okwoche. Gunmen have killed at least 74 people in Nigeria's northwestern state of Sokoto, wounding many others in a series of attacks on several remote villages. Police are searching for more bodies following several attacks on remote villages. The BBC's Ishaq Khalid reports from Abuja.
This is one of the most deadly attacks in Sokoto, one of the states affected by the continuing activities of gunmen who often target communities to kill or kidnap people for ransom in northwestern Nigeria. The gunmen usually carry out overnight raids, but this time around, residents say they arrived in broad daylight on motorbikes, armed with guns and machetes, shooting and hacking villagers dead. Then they fled after hours of operations. Most of the victims have been buried, but residents and the police say a search operation for more bodies is still underway. At least 5 villages were targeted in Sabon Birni area of Sokoto State in the latest violence. The attacks happened barely a week after the Nigerian military launched a renewed operation against bandits in neighboring Katsina and Zamfara state. Now the authorities are suggesting that the bandits, the armed men, are now changing location from one state to another. But the region has seen violence for quite a long time, even though killings of this magnitude are quite rare. In a recent report, the International Crisis Group said more than 8,000 people have been killed in the past 9 years or so in the northwestern part of Nigeria in violence involving farmers, herders, and criminal gangs. Ishaq Khalid, BBC News, Abuja.
English Premier League football clubs are understood to have agreed in principle to restart the league on the 17th of June. There'll be 2 midweek matches between Manchester City and Arsenal and Aston Villa and Sheffield United. The BBC has learned a future fixture will be played on the weekend of the 20th of June. Now, music lovers, listen up. Many of you will be familiar with the legendary US record label Def Jam, home to some of the world's biggest hip-hop acts. Well, now Universal Music is launching Def Jam Africa, which they say will represent the best of hip-hop, Afrobeats and trap from the continent. South Africa's Nadia Nakai is one of the first artists to have been snapped up. A little earlier, she told us why.
It feels amazing, to be honest with you, because I grew up watching music videos that had that Def Jam logo at the end, and it felt like it was like the fraternity of hip hop. And a lot of the artists especially artists that I listened to, like DMX and Ludacris, they were part of that label. So for me, it's so exciting to be also being announced with other artists, because it feels like a hip hop movement. And I think that's what is going to inspire local or African hip hop artists to want to be a part of Def Jam, because it wasn't about just being a part of a label. It was kind of being a part of the group of people that were under that label. I think one thing I understand and one thing I think people understand is that the label doesn't make the artist. But if the artist is not making an amazing music and not pushing themselves and not releasing the product that needs to help, what the label is supposed to do is amplify what already the artist has, which is the talent. So regardless of what situation that artist is in, if they sign to a Def Jam or if they sign to a smaller label, it all depends on how good that artist is. The fact that Def Jam Africa has come to Africa, it's now bridging a gap that was very hard for us to attain before.
Let's talk now to Sipho Dlamini. He's the Universal Music Africa's Managing Director for South Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa. He joins me now from Johannesburg. And Sipho, what's Def Jam Africa bringing to the table?
Well, good evening. What we're bringing to the table is a dedicated team of people who will focus on these genres, hip-hop, Afrobeat and trap music. They'll specialize in the A&R and marketing of this talent and developing it to a level that we can then export it to the rest of the world.
There are worries that you might be trying to take the talent away from smaller independent labels on the continent, which have been promoting these genres in the past.
Well, I think the needs of artists and labels in Africa differ. So there are some independent labels that are able to function without global labels like Universal, but there are some that need that global infrastructure and that distribution arm. I mean, Universal has over 65 offices around the world, and it means that we're able to do things in other countries and in other markets that a label sitting in Zimbabwe or Ghana or Kenya might not be able to do on their own. So we do partner with labels as well as signing artists. We do both. In fact, Casper Nyovest, our deal with him is with Family Tree, his label, which means that the artists that he's signing and wishing to develop are now plugged into a global network to Universal and Def Jam Africa.
So, I mean, these artists that you mentioned have been doing quite well on their own without Universal Music. So, you know, what exactly will be different when they sign on to you?
Well, I'll give you an example. So Nasty C is an artist that's been recording and doing well in South Africa. But since signing to Universal Music, we've had him perform in the US at Essence Music Festival, for example. This year, he performed at Solution Grange's Grammy Showcase the day before the Grammy Awards. Also, we were able to facilitate for him to go to Japan. He collaborated with another artist in Japan called JP Wavy. Through that collaboration, he was then going to be on the official Olympic song and performing at the Japan Olympics. That's just an example of the kind of things that a company like Universal and Def Jam can do to develop and help artists grow beyond their immediate market and immediate environment.
So that's what the artists get. What does Universal Music get in return?
Well, this is our job. This is what we signed up to do, is to discover talent in all the corners of Africa and give that talent the best opportunity to have a career, a sustainable career, and to develop that talent to be successful in their country, but also across the continent, and hopefully one day beyond that into other markets.
Sipho Dlamini, wishing you all the very best. Thanks for speaking to us here on Focus on Africa. And some of my favorite artists, Jay-Z, Nas, Jhené Aiko, and LL Cool J are on Def Jam Records. Thank you very much. Now, just before we go, a quick look at our top story. The head of the Africa Center for Disease Control and Prevention has called for a greater effort to counter the coronavirus as evidence grows that it is increasingly being spread within communities across the continent. That's it on Focus on Africa for today. I am Peter Okwoche. Don't forget you can get in touch with me on social media. I'm at Okwoche, but for now, that's it. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.